Would you please call the roll?
Member DiZoglio? Member Donovan?
Here.
Member Keegan? Member Maxwell?
Yes.
Member Shabilia?
Present.
Member Willett? Mayor Beauregard?
Here. We have 4 members present. That makes a quorum. May I have a motion and a second to accept the agenda as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Motion from Member Shabilia, second from Member Donovan. Any discussion? If there's no discussion, all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? The ayes have it. Our agenda has been accepted. We'll now rise for the flag salute. Pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands,
one
one
nation,
nation, under God,
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please remain standing and join me in a moment of silence to recognize the passing of Bill James, a physical education teacher, cross-country, and wrestling coach who impacted thousands of lives throughout his many years with the Methuen Public Schools. Thank you. We have some public participation. I'll invite Member Shabilia to read that into the record.
Jade Gelbert, 6 Lady Slipper Lane. I wanted to write in about 2 topics. First, I had sent emails to the committee in early September regarding requirements of public participation to broadcast their address when speaking. I have included the chain to the emails. To the end of this email, it does not need to be read out loud. The policy on public participation reads that public participants, and quote, shall identify him herself by name and address. It does not say that the name and address need to be announced to the public at large. I had asked if this would be possible for the public to not be required to identify their address on the record. These can be written on a sheet at the meeting or included on the emails to be read aloud, but could be kept off of the public broadcast. The response I received to those emails were largely positive or in line with not requiring the address to be spoken aloud. I noticed that this was not adopted at the last meeting. I am wondering if this is something that needs to be a policy or simply discussed in order to be eliminated. To be clear, I do not understand participants need to provide their address. I'm just hoping to see the requirement of it being read out loud to be skipped. Second, I want to give some input from parents' perspective. Last week, I had the honor of spending time at the Timony with the Follett staff, as well as some volunteers and local folks restocking the library in that school. I have pushed for libraries returning to the schools for a while, as I have heard you do in the past few meetings. Celebrate the wins. The libraries are returning. I'm sure that there's still much work that needs to be worked on, and I hope to see the libraries expand in the future, but I wanted to thank you for all your hard work in making this happen.
Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to speak? If not, I'll close public participation. If you cannot make a meeting in person for public participation, you can send an email to Martha Sorois at masirois@methuen.k12.ma.us before 3 p.m. on the day of a school committee meeting. Superintendent, I'll invite you to begin the discussion regarding Beth Israel Leahy Health Behavioral Services.
Thank you. I'd like to call up Jennifer Long and John Crocker, who are both with us tonight. So we have, this was a request of Member Shabilia and others a few, maybe months ago at this point, to have this discussion and just get a better understanding of those services and how they fit within the Methuen Public Schools. So thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me. Okay, thank you. So I'm very happy to be here discussing the services of our Community Behavioral Health Center. I think there's a place where it can definitely fill a need, especially for the families that don't have the natural supports and the capacity to wait for months to be, connected with somebody through care. Care Solace, thank you. I was going to say Care Solutions, but I knew that wasn't it. Care Solace. I think that we have walk-in services. They can be seen for an intake on a walk-in basis. It's insurance blind, so we can see people that are undocumented that have no insurance. They can be matched with a prescriber within a week, and they can, if there's not a therapist to match with them immediately, they can be bridged by one of my clinicians in the urgent care team. So it's a pretty robust service. We also have an engagement team now that can really support higher need families with non-clinical needs, connection to DTA, DMH, work with them on applications, insurance, making sure it's maximized, and just really multi-levels of support for high need families. I also think it's important that we have the opportunity to work with somebody in crisis before they're put on an ambulance. There are a lot of diversionary steps we can take, and I think, once we get to know these higher need children, right, these crises don't come out of a vacuum. We can put things in place before it gets to the point where they need to be on an ambulance. I know justifiably so, our response time in the past has not been good. I've only been the program director for maybe a little under 2 years, and the most outside we were in our 60-minute window was like 8%, and that was last September. Since February, we've been 100%, like within the 60-minute response time. So I've really worked hard on building staff. I have more control over triage now, which allows us to do that. And John has a very well-trained and very robust staff and program, but I definitely think there's a certain demographic in Methuen that I want to make sure that we support as well. We can help the schools with that, and I'm happy to answer any questions you all have.
Questions from the committee? Member Shabilia?
So first off, thank you for coming out tonight. I know we had planned this for a few weeks ago, but there was unforeseen circumstances. So I guess my first question to you is, can you give us a high-level overview of kind of what changed? Because I know that historically the model was different. I know there's a realignment from state level that's kind of reinvigorating.
Right,
your
so
whole
the
program.
behavioral health roadmap, right, kind of took, went into action maybe a couple of years ago. It was operationalized with the state, and that was part, like, it encompassed a bunch of different care settings, including PCP offices, the emergency rooms. They are supposed to be more responsible. In terms of community behavioral health, there's supposed to be no wrong door. So we have somebody on site 24 hours a day. They can be, we have clients can come in, walk in, and be seen for a crisis eval 24 hours a day. This particular clinician feels comfortable going out into the community with or without the police 24 hours a day, so we do mobiles now 24 hours a day. We have walk-in, you can walk in and like I said, have an intake, right, between 8 a.m. and 8 p.m., Monday through Friday, and that just to get connected with care, get bridge therapy, right, and then also on the weekends from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m.
You said walk-in. Where is the office?
12 Methuen Street.
Okay.
In Lawrence. And again, we are insurance blind, so that's a huge difference. The access is a huge difference. It's not, we're kind of, my team, the urgent care piece of it is new, so it's now mobile crisis psychiatric urgent care, and that's now we're equipped to provide bridge therapy to people, clients in need of immediate stabilization, right? And getting them connected to medication like within a week.
Bridge therapy, just the definition.
So bridge therapy is kind of it's therapy, it's short-term solution-focused therapy, sometimes involving CBT, for clients in crisis to make sure that they're stable enough to wait maybe 2 weeks till they get matched with a therapist, right? Or get, if they're in a care solace, queue with the provider through Care Solace, we can bridge them for as long as they need it until they're matched with some, like, longer-term services in the community. I think we've kind of gone to more of a transitional model. We don't necessarily, there are some clients that need long-term therapy through our agency, but mostly the population that we serve, it's short-term solution-focused work, right? We see them for stabilization, get them connected to the resources they need, get them connected with medication, and then sometimes we can discharge them, after a year or so. We don't keep people, in therapy necessarily, and I think that's part of the difference, like, in how we differ from, a traditional outpatient clinic. right? And then that includes, too, we have some medical resources, we have nurses there to do health screenings, and we have an engagement team, like I mentioned, to kind of connect people to non-clinical resources. So I think that's how we differ from where we were at before, we got the contract and were designated a CVHC.
What other communities do you cover?
We cover Methuen, Lawrence, and the Andovers.
What is your involvement with Lawrence and the Andovers?
So North
Schools,
Andover.
public school systems.
So we just had a kind of a refresher on what we do and what we have to offer with Lawrence. We did 2 virtual staff meetings, right? We split them up because it's a pretty big staff. But we're in Lawrence, we do clinical follow-ups. We're in Lawrence probably for half the day. Where one of my clinicians or a couple of clinicians are back and forth or might be in there to do some clinical follow-ups to assess a student. We're very involved. We have Andover, they typically send people in to see us after school, right? And we're in North Andover, I'd probably say, 2 or 3 times a month. Sometimes more, sometimes less.
For the last year or so, what's been the involvement with Methuen?
Methuen, I think we have a great relationship. I think John has a very robust and well-trained staff. He has the statistics, but we have been in Timony, I think maybe, I don't know how many times did you say? We have a collaborative meeting with the counselors planned, so I will be doing a presentation with the counselors on what an appropriate referral is, how we can help support them with kids in crisis. I think, again, there's some staff that's been here for a long time and is probably hesitant about getting us involved because our response times were poor. I know my MCI coordinator, when I first started as a clinician, was not easy to work with, and the MCI coordinator is the person that kind of is involved with the school. So it's not, the collaboration has been great with John. I think in the schools, it's like they have questions, and I understand, and so I'm hoping to have the opportunity to kind of improve that.
And just to share a little bit, I think that because of the length of some of the staff tenure in this district, to your point, it's just simply the case that we want a refresher. We want to make sure that people are aware of what's available, and the model has changed pretty dramatically. So one of the things that's on my mind and that I know that we've been chatting about recently is just the opportunity to divert away from sending a student on an ambulance.
Right.
I want to make sure that can constitute a traumatic experience unto itself. And
Right.
I want to make sure that if we can find a way to leverage some support to actually divert away from that and provide some stabilization in the moment, even when we've deemed it to be the case that the student does need an evaluation, sending in a care team that can provide the regulation and then
Right.
ultimately thread the needle for support afterwards, that's something I'm very interested in.
Yeah, and we have, all of the districts have, what we call them MVPs, multi-visit patients. They're high-risk students that are going to need the support, and if we can get to know them and start working with them, and the teachers or the counselors call us in before it gets to the point where they're dysregulated, right, when they know that they're ramping up, and we can actually maybe intervene and get some things going for that child before it gets to the point where they're, and it's not a perfect system, but I think there's definitely a place for that too.
We can circle back for a
Yep,
second round.
I know, I heard the beep.
Great. Any other members with questions? Member Maxwell?
I think this is great. I think it's huge. I'm so glad that you came to speak because I had no idea that this was even a thing. So, as a parent, as a community member, as a person, just thank you for coming to this with us. Now, is this for just the children behavioral, or can teachers,
Anybody, anybody.
So anybody can access
Yeah,
this
anybody
help.
can access this, and, John, I make sure that my cell phone number or the cell phone, our work cell, my youth clinical supervisor is out there. If people just want to call for advice, consult, what do you think? Can you give me your thoughts on this particular student? This is going on with this family, what do you think? Like, we're very happy to, develop rapport with the counselors and the teachers so that they can, call us and use us as a resource whenever they need to, or teachers, like staff members that are having issues, like, anybody can walk in. So we can only go out to Methuen, Lawrence, and the Andovers. I have people walking in from other towns. If they want to walk in and talk to us, they can walk in and talk to us 24 hours a day,
That's
7
great.
days a week.
Thank you.
Yeah, and
No other-
brought some little business cards with our contact information and some one-page flyers with more information, if anybody wants the, yeah.
Is that all? Member Donovan?
Again, thank you for coming. So I just want to clarify, you said in Lawrence you do clinical follow-ups to assess the students. Does that include regular appointments? I know in some cases, students are serviced in
So-
school.
So
With
we
regular-
don't do therapy in the schools.
Okay.
We don't have a team that, we're not set up to do
Okay.
that with the schools. We don't have a contract with the Methuen schools to provide therapy. But, I mean, if a kid is in crisis, we
Yeah.
can do the initial evaluation, and I can have somebody go in for 7 days and just, between school and home, work with them, make sure, and if we need to evaluate them again to get another 7 days of follow-up until other maybe external supports are put into
Yeah.
place, right? We can do that. And we're very creative in our maintaining contact with those kids that need it.
And kudos to you for improving your response time for the mobile.
Yeah, I mean, we're a
Response
mobile
team.
crisis team. We need to go
Yeah.
out, and we need to go out fast, and I've been lucky enough to get the staff on board. I have a lot of Spanish-speaking staff now as well. I have paraprofessionals and clinicians who speak Spanish, which is very helpful.
And that leads into one of my questions was, what languages are available to our students and families?
I have a clinician that speaks French, and she's pretty good with Haitian Creole. I have a number of clinicians that speak Spanish. I have a clinician that speaks Portuguese. I have a clinician that speaks, he's Vietnamese, I think it's Khmer.
Okay.
We have a couple of different dialects from various countries in West Africa. I have clinicians from all over the world, and so I'm pretty fortunate. And then we have a couple of interpreters we can access sometimes from the CVHC, and there's always that language line, which is less than ideal, but we're pretty skilled at using it if we have to.
And I think my last question is, Mr. Crocker, you spoke about getting staff up to speed, because I know it was an issue a few years ago when you have a child in crisis and you need help. And I totally agree with you about trying not to call an ambulance. That's traumatic for everyone, not just the student, everyone on the team. What kind of outreach to parents, because they certainly can refuse your services?
They can. We've received some interesting directives from the state through Carillon, right?
Right.
They used to be Beacon. They kind of oversee all of the Mass Health products. And they work very closely with the Office of Behavioral Health. So there's two things that have changed. We are always going to look for parental consent before we come to a school, but they want us to come out of whether or not we have it, right, if a kid's in crisis. So
And that's new?
That's different, and I have mixed feelings about that, but I think that it's necessary in some cases, right? Because they feel as though you're the de facto guardians while they're in school during the day, and if you feel it's necessary, then we should go out. Also, in terms of community evaluations, if a family member calls for an adult who, and this includes 18, transitional age, and I'm not sure how much, it's just interesting. If they call us for an evaluation, we need to go, whether or not the client gives consent, right? We still have to go. There was an incident, I think, with another crisis team last year where a family member called, the client didn't give consent, the team didn't go. Fortunately, it wasn't us, and that person took their life later on in the day, took her life. So, her own life. So I think we're kind of asked to do a lot to kind of support families in the schools sometimes when the clients may not be on board. They might not be, making good decisions at that time.
And I think my last question, you alluded to it. Do you have any data to share with us about how involved?
So I have data on our response times. I'm not sure, how often we go out, how many evaluations.
Yeah, and I don't know if that's pertinent, but I'm just wondering about the involvement in our schools.
I think John would track that. I know Mass Health has it. I don't
Okay.
necessarily, I can get that for you. I don't have it right now. I wasn't prepared to bring that
Okay.
up. I'm sorry, but I can get that. if
Don't
you-
apologize.
Yeah, if you like it. And one other thing that we have in terms of supporting the families is that part of our team is called, they're paraprofessionals, right? So we have family partners whose primary qualification is that they have been parents of a child, like in the behavioral health system, or has had special needs. So they're actually there to make sure the families understand what's happening, that voice and choice is respected. that their wishes are respected to, the best we can, because the clinician's always their first, concern is going to be the well-being of the child, but we also have to make sure the parents understand what's happening and have, their voices are heard, right? And we can do what we can do to make it work for them as well, and that's something I think that's really special that we can bring to the table.
Thank you.
Member DiZoglio, any questions?
No, I'm good, thank you.
Member Shabilia, we can have a second round?
Thank you. You had mentioned 7 days a few minutes ago. I want to better understand that because I know from talking to just staff in our buildings that more often than not, we have kind of like a core group of kids where you're going to see repeat behavior from them.
Yep.
They're going to repeat crisis.
Yep, those are our MVPs.
I like the positive spin. What is the 7 days and how does that work? Because the way I'm hearing it is basically you become staff augmentation. You're
Right.
essentially in the building helping us mitigate those crises
Right. So
before
we
they
can-
could escalate or
We can
continue.
kind of check in with them. So once we do the initial evaluation, we're allowed to provide, right? Like it gets into the whole billing piece, but the state allows us to provide 7 days of clinical follow-up, up to 7 days, where we can actually come in, do some stabilization work, do a mental status update, just to make sure that the level of care that we decided during the initial evaluation is still appropriate, and to just keep eyes on that child. So yes, that we can definitely, we're not here half the day, right? We're here for, it's crisis, I have to keep my staff moving on to the next crisis, but we can definitely come in and support the staff.
I'm sure there
I
is no
have,
shortage of
and I have a
crisis.
clinical supervisor, a youth clinical supervisor, who's excellent, who can be here, and have appointments with staff about students, or, they can, whatever it is that we can do. She's really helpful, she's great with the youth and the families. And then we also have something called like a paraprofessional follow-up calls for the parents, right? They can also be supported, outside of school through phone calls or visits.
So, thank you. So as you know, we are using Care Solace to connect students, families to outpatient therapy and medication prescribing entities and folks. I know as well, I'm sure, John, you probably have data to support it. There, more often than not, because of the lack of providers, there's generally a wait time for this. Through no fault of Care Solace's,
Right.
but there's a wait. What, are you able to provide these services so these kids are not sitting on a wait list?
Right. And, right, yes, we are, because I said, we can have them in, they can walk in, or we can make an appointment at their convenience at up till 8 o'clock at night on the weekends, where they can have the intake done. We can have them match with a prescriber within a week, and if there's not an immediate match for a therapist, my team can do the short-term solution-focused bridge work to kind of make sure they're stable to get on a wait list. And,
Yeah, the bridge therapy.
yeah, the bridge therapy, yep.
So short-term stabilization.
Yep. And just to make, and we can keep that going for as long as we need to. I think, again, I'll say it again, I think Care Solace is a good solution for families that have natural resources, that have private insurance, but those
That's not the bulk of our
families that are working 4
demographic.
jobs and never home, that don't have, that have Mass Health, I can't really see them, I can see them languishing and maybe not getting the support that they need.
Yeah, I would love to see us take more better advantage of those services that are out there, especially for those folks who don't have the natural support structures. We keep saying the bridge and short-term. Are there longer-term care
Yep,
options?
Where my team does the psychiatric urgent care piece of it until they get matched with a therapist upstairs for longer-term treatment, right? So we've hired a number of prescribers. The wait list for prescribers is definitely shorter. We're trying to build staff outpatient, but I think right now the longest wait is maybe 20 days, right? For most of the demographics, like, appointments, after-school appointments are hard to get, and they're, especially for Spanish-speaking families, but we manage, like I said, my staff will supplement until they're matched with somebody, and that might go into a 30-day wait list for somebody upstairs, but we're there to kind of bridge the gap until they get matched. But I think, 30 days is definitely better than, 6 months, which is what a lot of the,
Yeah, just to clarify, for the wait list through Care Solace, it's not that long at all. It's a very short wait time,
that's good.
yeah.
Can you, so you keep saying, I don't know if you actually said what the response time is. I know we keep saying that it's gotten shorter.
We're required by the state we have 60 minutes to respond, and that's our limit. We have to respond within 60 minutes.
And then my last pre-planned question, what's the difference between the CBHC core services and Leahy's outpatient clinic?
Right.
Because you guys are Leahy.
Yes,
right?
we are Leahy, so we have outpatient clinics that, like, they're more long-term, right? And we do have, like, our ambulatory clinic upstairs. Again, because of the population that we serve and because it's a community behavioral health center, we tend to be more transition-focused. So we get people services, supports, provide them therapy, get them connected with the prescriber, and then maybe after a year or so, move them on, refer them out, or terminate. That being said, there are clients that need to stay on longer, and they stay on longer. But I think and then, the medical support, the medical screening piece of it, the engagement team, getting the supports for the non-clinical needs, right? I think that's a little different than a lot of what the outpatient clinics offer. They offer medication management and therapy. And ours is more, we offer more. We have an 8-bed crisis stabilization unit on site, which is more geared towards the adults. And crisis, right? So that's part of the CBHC too model.
That's fantastic. I mean, it all sounds fantastic, and it sounds like your team would be able to work with John's team to provide additional services to the students here that are in crisis and facing crisis and dealing
Yeah,
with
and
all of the issues of the world is throwing at them.
Yeah, and families too, it's
families.
typically a systemic issue, a lot of, especially with those MVPs, right? And so we are able to address that too, through supports that we can provide, and that's helpful too.
I would love to be able to hear from you folks, I don't know, late May, early June, whatever one of our last meetings is, just to see like how Methuen has taken advantage of
Okay.
the services that you guys can offer and how that is, what I'm hoping is a positive impact for John and his group.
Yeah, that's definitely doable. We'll make sure I'm tracking that data. Yeah, and, any of you want to come for a tour, like we're there, just, my work cell 781. Don't give this to any families, students, but my work cell 781.
You're on live TV, I wouldn't put that out there.
Sorry, I forgot about that. I'm not even supposed to be on camera.
Well, you can leave a card
I'll leave
with
a
Dr.
card.
Kwong,
I'll leave
and
a couple of cards.
those who want them can
But at
grab
any
them.
rate, if any of you want a tour of the facility at 12 Methuen Street, I can't believe I almost just did that. How embarrassing. I'm not used to this.
It's okay, you would have wondered why you had 7,000 phone calls.
Yeah.
The amount of spam you would have received tomorrow would have been unreal.
Yeah, no, that.
Your
that-
car
thank you
warranty
for
was going to
stopping me.
be
That
very
would've been a funny
expired.
joke. 7, 8, yeah, so I will leave I almost did it again. I will leave my card, or my phone number, and if any of you want a tour of our facility, please feel free to come by. I'll arrange,
BJ.
Member Donovan, yeah.
And this is really to Mr. Crocker. Are there any other similar agencies? I know you send students, refer anyway, Care Solace, Leahy, Beth Israel. Are there any other agencies that support our kids and families?
A
that come?
lot.
Yeah.
Ultimately, we're routing students to dozens and dozens of agencies across the country. I do want to say, though, we can indicate our preferred provider within our care matching system, and the only preferred provider that we have is Leahy. So how it works is when we send a referral through, it is routed to Leahy first. Now, this is where things start to become more on the family's side. So like, if they're provided an option to go to Leahy, they can take that, or they don't have to. Like, we can't require them to. So it is the case that we're pointing at Leahy first, but it is, families have agency to be able to select whether or not they want to continue with that, or if they want to select another agency. I can't say that I would ever undermine dozens of other agency relationships and only go through one agency. That would just be irresponsible for us to do. We're routing 450 cases through Care Solace last year, plus another 100 through Cartwheel, plus 1,300 in-house. So we have a massive amount of care that we're providing. I want to leverage Leahy for everything they're worth, and they're worth quite a bit to us. But that being said, yes, families have agency to seek other providers, and I'm never going to be able to tell them they can't do that. But I can advise them to check out our local CBHC first.
If I may, just to clarify, you said you're referring to Leahy, but is that Leahy, this Leahy is different than Leahy outpatient? Or is it?
Correct.
So when you're doing these referrals through the tool, it's going to Leahy outpatient, not to Gen and Teen?
Nope, to Gen and Teen.
Oh, okay. I just want to clarify, because now there's more Leahys at the party, so.
But again, look, we're insurance blind, and
Yeah.
and I think there's a huge need for that with this community.
100%.
Especially where we're expecting our team to essentially unpack childhood trauma in
Yeah.
these offices in the matter of 25 minutes to get with a kid, like,
Yeah, that's a lot to do in
Yeah.
25 minutes, and that can actually,
take
Yeah,
decades.
I would say that the care that we're providing, though, I don't want to just code it as 20, 25 minutes.
No, but I mean, you're not getting it's not a therapy session, you know what I mean? Like,
It is. I have to say it is.
I hope not,
Yeah,
we're
but
not licensed for that.
Well, I've got some attacking child, like trauma, but like in a single, session, I think that's but anyway, we're both clinicians, we both have our opinions, right? So,
Any other questions from the committee? If not, we'll move on. Thank you very much for the presentation. These are really important services. Thank you. At this point, Superintendent, I'll invite you to begin the discussion on the strategy for district improvement, including the 2024 MCAS accountability data for Q1.
Thank you. So I am just watching the TVs to see if are we going to be able to get your presentation up there, Dr. Golubsky? Okay. So I will turn it right over to Dr. Golubsky. We have two same kind of topics, but we want to separate them tonight because they are coming at you tonight. But we have the MCAS and accountability data we want to share with you and try to make some sense of that. And then we also have our first quarterly report for our strategy plan. And we want to share some things with you there as well.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, everyone. I'll start with the strategy plan presentation since that happens to be first in the packet. So this is our first quarterly update on our new plan. And as I like to say, the abridged version is the first objective, just to review, focuses on literacy development as well as language acquisition. The second deals with reducing opportunity and achievement gaps between student groups. And the third, to enhance partnerships with students and families. So the way I've chosen to present, I know that we talk about a consistent format from all the quarterlies, so at the close you can tell me if this seems appropriate or not, was just to go by objective, and with the first slide, just listing the four central priorities of the objective that we'll be trying to reach over the next 3 years. And then I've highlighted some key actions. So in terms of our literacy acceleration and language acquisition development, these are the things that have happened thus far in the school year that speak to this objective. So the first is our involvement with the Learning Acceleration Network, which I know I've mentioned before, but it's now underway. So LAN, as we call it, is a version similar to what we were working with the GLEAM grant, where we have a consultant who comes in to make sure that walkthroughs are productive, that feedback through teachers seems to be on point, and that our curriculum and instruction is heading in the right direction. So we've been working with our coach who's already come into the district and visited with our teachers through walkthroughs, and it happens to be the same coach we've been working with previously through the GLEAM grant, which is great. And the track that we've decided to focus on is accelerating literacy learning for multilingual learners. And what that track does is it pairs us with neighboring districts who have a similar focus, and so we'll be meeting with those colleagues regularly throughout the year to pool ideas under the support of our LAN coach. Next, we have the walkthroughs and focus indicators. So the new DESE teacher rubric came out very recently, and we're using it this year. It has a real focus on supporting individual student needs, and I like it very much for that reason. The focus indicators also speak to knowing the student in front of you, what they need for extra support. And so those indicators are part of our teacher observation to regulate and calibrate our feedback to teachers. We've also done some work looking at MCAS data, which we'll get to in the next presentation. And we've been looking at the data by grade level, by teacher, by standard, however many ways you can slice it. And we found that we have several educators that have been trending as being very successful in certain areas in the MCAS exam, in some cases far outpacing the state. So we're working to leverage those teachers to provide professional development and sharing best practices among peers. We've also done our initial literacy benchmarking for our screener. I'll get to that later. The literacy newsletter went out to parents highlighting tools that students have access to both in school and at home. And these are the benchmarking scores from our first assessment, which I'm going to share now. So I've provided for you, and I parsed it out first by grades 1 through 3 because they were using the Dibbles assessment. The first column shows the initial benchmark test of last year. So we ask that this first benchmark be given prior to September 13th. So really at the start of school, before instruction has necessarily begun. So we have the first column showing that first benchmark last year, the second column showing where they ended up at the end of the year, which would be benchmark 3. And then the third column to your right is the one that we've most recently given prior to September 13th of this year. So this is done by cohort, so it's not grade 1 from last year compared to grade 1 this year. Grade 1 this year would be showing the students who were in K last year. So not entirely surprising to see the dip from 3 to 1 when there's been no instruction given over the summer, and we typically do see a summer slide, and also because the test is measuring for a grade level higher than where they were measured in June. So just a few months later, if they were just on grade level, which would have been potentially K or grade 1 at the close of last year, now they're looking at the subsequent year. The next slide shows grades 4 through 8. So this would be our Reading Plus, Dreambox, Insight assessment. Same idea with the benchmarking. So I showed where we left off, and this is again the group of students at the close of last year. Next column, the second one in, benchmark 1 of this year. And then within that benchmark, I wanted to separate the comprehension score versus the vocabulary score. That was interesting to note that in most grades, the average shows that students are at or above in vocabulary, and comprehension seems to be what students find most challenging, which was as expected. And this was an interesting finding as it pertained to the insight scores. So when I separated by student and I started scrolling through, some scores were red, some had asterisks next to them, some had dashes, and I called to confirm with our representative that I had the right understanding of what that meant. And so Dreambox flags students for the following reasons. For students who score 4 or more levels below their previous assessment, students who score as a 0.5, which is a mid-kindergarten year range, and scored higher than 2 on their previous assessment, and also students that score as a 0.5 or below which is a mid-year kindergarten student. So it seemed strange to me, especially when then I crossed some of the students scoring in that range with their MCAS scores and classroom grades, and it seemed that something had gone awry on the benchmarking. So this would be a situation where our representative said, if what you're seeing in this benchmark doesn't match with what you know about the student or have seen in other data areas, that might be cause to reset and have them retest. I did not. I left it as such, because I think that was the will of the committee last time, but I thought that that was interesting to note. So we want to make sure that what we're using in these quarterly assessments and using to potentially adjust instruction is reliable data. So we have some plans to make sure our next benchmark may be more accurate in that way. That's an interesting finding we just wanted to share. Objective 2, this is reducing opportunity and achievement gaps between student groups to improve outcomes. And these are the priorities which we will center our focus on for the next 3 years. So our key actions, we have partnered with Blue Engine as a district, and we currently have 3 co-teaching pairs at Methuen High School who are collaboratively planning and going through coaching cycles with our Blue Engine consultant. And at the end of this year, we'll become the models of what we hope co-teaching to be in the district, and will serve as live examples for teachers from other schools to see. So the pairings bridge between general education and special education, and general education in the English learner department. We've had Blue Engine in for PD. They've been in multiple times to meet with the pairs. They're coming back tomorrow. I Decide, our drug education curriculum for grades 5 through 12. In October, we had 6 teachers and counselors who received the I Decide training, and the district has begun the implementation. Data discussions are occurring in each school, so I've been visiting with the leadership teams and principals in each school to review MCAS and accountability data by student group. So each school is aware of their growth areas and celebration areas, and can communicate such to grade level teams. And each building has initiated plans to support students based on their need. In terms of collaborative problem solving, a cohort of staff has been identified to attend the advanced concepts coaching sessions to build capacity in the district, to then go on to train other district staff in collaborative problem solving. And we're very excited that tomorrow marks the first tour to the middle schools to celebrate the high school and to share all that it has to offer. So Anthony Corrett, the interim principal at the high school, and his team have worked really hard. It's going to be a student-centered presentation where they'll be doing most of the talking and sharing, and we hope to let our 7th and 8th graders around the district know about all the awesome programs and opportunities available to them. Finally, objective 3, enhancing partnerships with students and families. So a quick highlight here that MHS hosted the NEASC team in their collaborative conference. If you've been around for a while, you know that the NEASC accreditation process used to be very rigorous, and it felt like a gotcha in terms of you had to provide all the evidence you had, and they would come and tell you the areas in which you were strong and weak. And now it's much different, and I think it's much better. So the first step of the NEAS process, the high school underwent a self-study. So the faculty and administrators together, as well as parents, helped to determine the areas that they thought we should be acting on and improving on over the next few years. And the purpose of the collaborative visit was for the NEASC team to either confirm, yes, we do believe you've identified the correct areas, or to change course. And so they did concur in their preliminary findings, shared with us that they believe going forward that we should complete our plan to develop a vision of the graduate, that we're going to make more uniform the recording of curricula. We're going to revisit the structure of the school schedule to make sure that we're providing for that co-planning time and other co-planning opportunities, as well as time for students to get support or enrichment beyond what they already receive. And finally, to increase student ownership of learning. So they will be back, NEASC will be back in a couple of years to see the improvements that have been made in those identified areas. And I included the picture of Ms. Moore and Ms. Dumont, who served as our co-chairs, and the medals that Mr. Corrett provided them as part of a recognition for their hard work. And also there's been a lot of work around building morale and positive energy at the high school, as evidenced by the picture. We had an October LPAC meeting, so the English learner families came together. There were about 40 families that came to the high school, and we had representatives from our technology department, our director Nancy Lopez and Matt Sarqua help with getting families on Infinite Campus and talking points in the language of their choice. These students also received books and family guides that help to explain to each family what they can expect their student to learn in that grade throughout the school year. We're planning for a district-wide literacy night that would feature an interactive performer along the lines of slam poetry and workshops for kids to do the same. And then a huge thank you to the parents, retirees, community members who have helped us over the past week in rebuilding our libraries. That has been no small feat, and a lot of elbow grease and passion has gone into that. So we're very appreciative of their work. We're about midway through the project, and we're into now the Tenney and CGS. So the Marsh and Timony, the major pieces have been completed. We just have some fine tuning to do, and we're really looking forward to getting those up and running. The expansion of the Mental Health Parent and Student Advisory Council was something to be celebrated. The council has gained 10 additional members, including parents and students, with representation across all schools and levels. The BRIGHT program at the CGS has been established since the start of the school year and has been receiving referrals. The monitoring of Tier 2 and 3 mental health services. Mr. Crocker has done some work in preparing spreadsheets for all counselors to track the type of source of the service referral, the service the student's receiving, the reason why, as well as progress monitoring the growth to ultimately determine the effectiveness of each approach. Universal mental health screening has concluded 5 through 12. And the social emotional learning and mental health expansion. Students in grades 5 and 7 participated in the Signs of Suicide curriculum. And the next slide shows, since the start of the year, just in September and October, here's all the professional development opportunities that have been made available to teachers as they pertain to each objective, 1, 2, and 3. That was a lot of information to take in. I'll pause there for questions.
Great. Questions from the committee?
Maybe start with each objective. Like, maybe that one makes it like objective 1 first, some questions, and then if that makes sense to everybody, just to keep the content the same. And
Okay, I'm going to stop screen sharing so the folks at home can see the committee, if that's okay.
so objective 1,
Yeah,
if
we'll
there
begin
are
with
questions.
objective 1. Any questions?
Objective 1, literacy acceleration and language acquisition.
Member Shabilia?
So I got an email today from a parent asking if I could ask you, in 1.1, it says build a culture of accountability for all teachers and educators. And I quote, the culture of accountability, what does this mean in real life? So that is the question.
Sure. So that culture of accountability, I'm happy to talk about that. So that's a difference from the last strategic plan where we just had the literacy focus. It was a little simpler. We were trying to get high quality materials in the classroom. We had the humanities supervisors making sure that was taking place, and principals were aware as well. For leaders, the culture of accountability is important because that means that everybody in the building and district should feel that sense of ownership and responsibility for promoting language and literacy. So for instance, so the work of the ELE supervisor it's not only their work to make sure that our students are making their benchmarks in terms of language proficiency, whether you teach math or history, or you oversee any subject area, or a principal or administrator in any realm, you should be focusing your work on helping to understand that. So that's a big part of the LAN that we're a group that we're partnered with, is that we're trying to build in more knowledge surrounding those areas to our administrators and teachers, but also sense of responsibility.
Awesome. Thank you.
Okay.
Other questions from the committee regarding objective 1? Member Donovan?
So that accountability, does that translate to some of the PD topics that are offered? When I'm looking at the titles.
Mm-hmm.
So a math teacher might be in one of the PD events supporting language acquisition in the classroom. Is that accurate?
Yes, we just did, in the most recent PD Day, K2 teachers were offered the opportunity to select from 5 or 6 mini sessions, many of which centered around language development, literacy, so they could choose where they felt like they needed a little more support.
I have 2 more questions.
Okay.
The literacy newsletter. Is that on? Can you hear me now? Okay, sorry. The literacy newsletter. How could we get a copy of that? Or how was it sent out?
I can send it to you.
I would like to
Okay.
read it.
Or I can put it on the website. So the humanities supervisors generally send the newsletters that they craft to the teachers that they're working with, which I think is a great idea. The new supervisor at the Tenney especially has been sending out newsletters to encapsulate what was discussed in common planning time and reiterate the important parts of the programming. And what I think is important is to start becoming even more transparent with families about all the tools and resources that we have, because if we're trying to partner to get things done at home and get to that shared goal of the student becoming stronger in literacy skills, they need to be aware. So I sent out the literacy newsletter, and I can certainly send you all a copy and post it on the website too.
Thank you. I don't want to make more work for you, but
No,
if
it's
it's
easy
on
to
the
do.
website, I
It's no
think we'd all
problem.
be interested to see what our families are getting. And last but not least, your interesting finding on the students who regressed in their testing.
The interesting finding that was like, these are, I call remarkable outliers.
Yeah. Well, the one thing I would like to clarify, I know there was a lot of big feelings about whether or not to retest at the end of last year, I believe. To clarify, is that a school committee decision? Because I am really uncomfortable with that. And I don't know if we took a vote on it, or I would just like to clarify, because I don't think we have the wherewithal to make those decisions,
Right.
while people with the advanced degrees do. So I just want to say I was really uncomfortable. If that's what happened, I'm sorry if I contributed to it, because I guess best practice might say something else. When you
Yeah.
think about kids who scored poorly, for whatever reason, that may not be showing what their skill set is, and then to think they're getting interventions they probably don't need, and that whole domino effect.
Well,
So
I think the advantage the teachers have and the people in the buildings and we have is that we have more data points to go on in terms of knowing the student's true ability. But in terms of what's reported here, which is just for this presentation, one data point, I kept it as is because
Yeah.
I knew there was some discomfort about whether I'd reset the test or not.
Okay, thank you. I just am really uncomfortable with that. You okay?
I hope so.
Okay.
Member DiZoglio?
So, point of clarification on that, the reason why, I'm pretty sure a lot of those students were caught rushing through the test.
Right.
So if they're rushing through the test, and I was one of them that spoke up about it and said, well, if they rush through the test, they shouldn't get another chance when they had their opportunity. It's not like a kid was sick or they rushed through the test because they didn't want to do the test. That was from the indication of that meeting. So we said the scores should be the way it is because that they chose to do that. But I didn't think we voted on it, but we said but also when it comes to my opinion on that as an educator, I give retests too, but at the same time, if a child is rushing through a test, especially these type of tests, well, no, they should be responsible. That's just my opinion. I know I'm gonna get crucified on Facebook tonight about this, but as an educator, I think a child should learn from their responsibilities of taking a test and shouldn't just get a reset because the fact that they rushed through a test and we want a perfect score from them. They should be accountable for what they do.
Yeah, may I? So I think the important part here, and I appreciate all the conversation, the deeper conversation that Dr. Golofsky and I had about this was that there was some discomfort here, for sure. And absolutely, the experts told us to retest the kids because they got through it in 2 minutes. And that's not giving us the indication of how well they can read. So we're not talking about a test we don't grade these, right? It's not for a grade on a report card. It's really for our benefit to understand how our kids are faring so that we can place them in the right courses. So the purpose of this test is not to the kid gets the grade he gets. That's not what this is. This is an assessment that says, I need to know how well the student can read. If not, I'm actually going to put that student based on some of those data points, and Dr. Golofsky's right, we have other data points, and the time that our educators are spending looking at those data points to make sure those kids get in the right place is also an interesting piece of this, right? Because you have kids' scores who are not matching their performance, and that is taking a lot longer to figure out where they actually need to be. And so there's a different, we're doing this for a very different purpose in the classrooms and education, and I thought it was important that we bring it to you in this way tonight, because it was actually greater. This trend was greater than what we presented to you in the spring. We saw this trend in the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, and now we're seeing it 4 through 8 pretty widespread. And so we have to have this conversation about what we're going to do with that information when we present and try to figure out what we're doing instructionally.
So the question I have, because it's similar to what we do at my school and in my district, so is this like an all-day thing?
No.
When it comes to this testing?
No.
Just, how long does it take to take
A
this
class
test?
period?
All right.
I'm going to let Dr. Golofsky answer that.
Yeah,
It
it
might
should be
a little
about
longer.
40 minutes,
40 minutes. Almost a class period.
All right,
give or take.
all right, because the difference is in my district, it's a all-day event.
No, it's an assessment, and it would be typically during that ELA class time.
Oh, and quick, also follow up. How many questions are usually on these assessments? Like, do you guys have that?
It differs. So it gives the student a reading selection. They read and respond, and then the next selection they're presented with is dependent upon how they scored on the previous assessment.
So it's
It's an adaptive.
Yeah,
so it's similar. Like the more again, I'm going off of what's in my district. So if a kid keeps scoring, just say he keeps getting the right questions to like certain assessments of that like ELA, he might only need to do about 35 questions compared to a student next to them that might have to do 50 questions, because if he gets it wrong, or is it similar? Or
no,
just,
I think it'd be similar in the amount.
Okay.
Because they're comfortable with where they're rating the student. It's interesting because we do have 4th graders in the district who are found to be reading at grade 13 which they call it, which is beyond high school. And then we have someone sitting next to them who's rating at a .5, which is flagged. So something went wrong there.
Thank you.
Member Maxwell?
So, regarding the testing, I don't remember ever voting on second testing or not. I think that the main concern with the second round of testing that we heard from parents was that kids were told that they had to second test and get a better grade to participate in things, to raise their grade, because they were testing so low. It was not about anything other than that. I just wanted to clarify that, because I know for myself, personally, I've seen it happen, I know it happens, so I don't want to take away from that part. I do understand there are glitches, and you guys are trained to, flag those, but there are situations and that parents were concerned about, that their kids were being retested
With a contingent
as a
upon.
punishment.
Yes.
Right.
And I
So
appreciate that. And
I
we-
just wanted to clarify that.
Thank you.
Also, in one of these, and I can't remember what objective, I'm sorry.
Yep.
But you had mentioned best practice. Is that going to be updated? Because I know that our best practice is outdated.
Best practices. I think you're talking about, are you talking about the DCAP?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All
Is
right.
that- is that
That's
not
different.
what- okay,
That's
I'm-
different.
Okay, then
No,
never mind.
that was a key action, and that's called the district accommodation plan.
Okay.
And so,
Sorry about
yes, that is in the plan to be updated, but we haven't done it in this
That's not-
session yet.
That's not this best practice
Yeah,
that I'm,
so
okay.
the best practices are things that we find are working in the classroom, that teachers become very skilled at, or that we know through research is something that's
Blanketed
evidence-based.
across Methuen, correct?
I'm sorry, say that again?
That's just blanketed across Methuen, like, this is how we do it, this is best practice?
Yes, it's evidence-based, research-based, and it's particularly a craft that's honed by the teacher, and that we find something that works, like the recipe that works, then we're going to try to spread that.
So just generalized, it's not, I gotcha.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
sorry about that.
That's okay.
Any other questions from the committee regarding Objective 1? If not, we'll move on to Objective 2, reducing achievement and opportunity gaps. Any questions from the committee? Member Shabilia?
Going to the last page of that section, for the Mental Health Parent and Student Advisory Council, and I forget the young man's name who was here the last cycle, he is a superstar. And my concern is when he leaves,
Yeah.
there's nobody in the wings. So I hope, John, I see you back there smiling and agreeing with me. I hope that we are cultivating more of him. But when you say 10 people joined, does that mean 10 people extra showed up to your meeting? Or are you guys like running a sign-up list now? Like what does that look like? And isn't your October meeting the 30th?
We have a meeting on Wednesday.
Yep.
Okay, because it says the October meeting, the council had 10 extra members, and by my count, next Wednesday hasn't happened yet.
We have the student meetings as well.
Oh, okay. So you got 10 more students.
We did.
That's even bigger for me. That's
Oh, we're
a
huge.
big win.
Yeah, because I remember, I'm with you. Like, he's a rock star. He's
Yeah.
fantastic. And we have other fantastic students on the council as well. We have 2 more years with him. Love that. But at the same time, I see these councils, and some mental health clubs across the state. And we actually had an opportunity to go, I think I mentioned this last time, to the NAN project, DPH, I think it was DPH or DMH funded, end of the year kind of council of councils. And these groups, unfortunately, end abruptly for the best of reasons. Kids move on. They go to college, and that's fantastic. So one of the charges of the leaders on these councils is you have to recruit. Like that just has to be the first thing that you are always attending to, is make sure that you're advertising, marketing what we do so that other people can be involved and that you can pass the torch at the end of the year. So that is something that we are attending to. We did get, I want to say, in addition to the 10-ish, I was lumping together students and parents. I want to say it's more than 10 that we actually got. So a good chunk of students, but also at the parent and student council meeting that we hold on Wednesdays in the afternoon virtually, which is the October iteration is coming up on Wednesday. We actually had, I want to say 6, maybe 7 parents that were new to the council. And based on, I mean, you and I chatted about this last year, really hard to recruit these parents to be a part of this. So we were thrilled to see that. We now have a diverse makeup of parents and kids. I just want to keep it going and keep recruiting. So anything that you can all do to also spread the word is going to be really helpful. I appreciate
if you have something, because like most of the communications I get from parents are mental health, social service related.
Sure.
That's just what people are sending me emails about. If you have like, I don't know, an infographic or something that you would share on, I could post it on Facebook and like people will see it.
100%.
Yeah, just shoot it over. I would love to post it, and if I can help drive even one extra person to your meeting,
I would love that.
I'll take the win.
Yeah. I did put together a flyer that is incredibly, it's what you would expect from an adult making a flyer.
Hey man, I'm not an artist either.
It's got an M in the middle, but lots of dates. It's
Jen
pretty great.
Lozel's out there somewhere. She can help us.
So the kids are actually working on a better flyer, which it's just going to be better than an M. So, yeah. So we'll have that soon. I'll get that to you.
Thank you. While I've got you there,
Yes.
can you expand on the Bright program? Because I know that was something we discussed during budget time.
Yes.
So it says that it launched and it's receiving referrals. Like, what does that mean, and how is it positively impacting CGS?
100%.
Right?
It is at the CGS, yes. So the roll-up for Bright is, the first few weeks, program has to be established. We've got to train people up, we've got to establish referral procedures. We work with the Bright team out of Brookline Center to be able to, we've drafted an entire intervention overview and plan that really kind of, the nuances of referral, the nuances of how to work, within the program, how to interface with the clinical staff, how to ultimately set up the room. I mean, down to, what has to be in the room to really effectively start these programs. So first few weeks of school was really about that, establishing the team. We were able to hire two program specialists that will be in the room. We also have an academic coordinator, and then we are tagging in the entire counseling team as the supports that push in to provide the mental health supports and also the crisis intervention. To date, we have 2 referrals, and I'll say that this is a Tier 3 general ed programmatic intervention. So we're not going to be looking for dozens and dozens of referrals. We're looking for students that require a really intensive support. I actually got to sit in on the referral meeting last week, walk through. We've accepted our first student into the program. Second referral meeting is happening actually this week. And we only opened the door for referrals a week and a half ago. But we did want to have a training with the entire staff to help them to understand what are we looking for in terms of a referral for this program, what is going to be the best kind of profile of student that will get the best support from a program like this. So the Bright program team sent in one of their staff members to help support that discussion at the faculty meeting at the beginning of the month.
Awesome.
We can circle back.
I heard the beeping, but I just have one quick follow-up to that
Yep.
specific statement. Can you real quick just tell us what do you foresee the capacity being for that program? And when you say Tier 3, what does that mean?
Oh, we could talk about this for a couple hours, my
I
friend.
mean, I have like 30 seconds before the mayor throws his beeper at me. So,
So the history of MTSS is, no. So Tier 3, we're talking about the highest tier of support. So when we're actually like organizing interventions across a multi-tiered system of support, I just drew a triangle for you. Top of the triangle. So intensive, and think frequency, dosage, duration. It's not about where it's delivered, what's being delivered, who's delivering it. Lots of care being pointed at one kid programmatically, so multiple people. So that's what I mean by Tier 3.
okay. That's helpful.
Cool.
And the capacity?
Capacity is going to be rolling, but I would say at any one time, we want to say 6 to 8 students, knowing that some students are going to require greater care for a short duration, some will need lesser care for a longer duration. So there's a capacity calculator that they've actually helped us to onboard, and we use that to be able to understand kind of like how much time does a student need from a care planning standpoint, from a family engagement standpoint, from an academic plan. So it's a lot of kind of looking at needs across domains and then trying to understand kind of what can we take on and still maintain the level of care.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions regarding Objective 2? Member DiZoglio? Oh,
I just want to clarify. So that was Objective 3, which was great. So if you have, I just want to give Dan Member Shabilia another chance. If there's Objective 2, we jumped, but we didn't want to stop the momentum there. It was good.
I'm going to need one of those reading assessments. No, I've got nothing on number 2.
I got confused for a moment, then I was like, oh, okay, he's jumped to 3, which is fine. I just didn't want to interrupt the momentum, but if we have a whole group of 2, we certainly want to see if you guys have questions about 2. Or
anything
3,
else?
we can just all jump to 3. I just want to make sure we're
If it
clear.
is the will of the committee, we can jump to 3.
Keep going with 3 if there are questions for folks, and then we'll end with 2. It's just, we'll be different tonight.
Member Maxwell?
Yeah.
I just have a quick question regarding the I decide. Is there,
Okay, we're going to 2.
that's Objective 2, right?
Yes, you're good. We're just going to keep going with questions. We'll just,
I decide, so is there a way to find that curriculum for parents so they can see what is being learned?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, okay.
Yeah, I would say,
Learned.
there's a pretty large manual, but the I Decide program, the I Decide curriculum, they do spell it out really clearly on their website as well. This is something that's getting chased across the entire state at this point, and for good reason, because ultimately a Tier 2 substance use intervention, see how I threw the tier in there? There we go. It is not really, there's not a lot of them. So I think it's going to be important for us to, when we find something that's really good and evidence-based, that we can get in front of students in a way that's efficient, effective, and that we can build capacity internally, we should go after that. So definitely check out the webpage. They have a lot of resources, and if you need any more, you can shoot me a quick email.
perfect. Can I just clarify one thing that
Yes.
Member Maxwell asked, because it might help if people are watching tonight, about the Tier 2, when are we using this in the district, so people have a better context for it, that it's not necessarily being used 5 through 12 in all of, it's not a course curriculum, it's an intervention curriculum.
That's correct,
I think
yeah.
that's super important for
Yes.
Mr. Crocker to explain, because that wasn't as explicit here.
Yeah, I
I thought it was
appreciate
a
that.
whole,
I know, that's why I said
Okay.
I could tell why the question was asked, that I wanted, and how it was written here, to make sure that everybody here understands how this curriculum is being used and with whom, and that it is not a 512 part of our health course curriculum.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
a great point. So students are referred into the I Decide curriculum following a substance use infraction. So it's really a means for us to intervene on behalf of students who we believe really need intervention around substance use. It is the case that we're also offering this as a means of diversion, so allowing for students to get education instead of simply a blanket punishment that doesn't teach them anything. So this is intervention before the problem gets worse.
So this was some of the conversation we had about suspension, right? Do we eliminate the length of suspension if the students are getting education as well? This is one of the programs we are trying to do that with, right? If kids are caught vaping, et cetera, then we're trying to incorporate I Decide in some of that time that they spend and eliminate as many days or any days, depending on where they are, of that consequence.
I think of it like this, we suspend a student for using substances, and sometimes they're going home alone
Yes,
using substances, and that doesn't make a lot of sense.
you're
Thank you.
welcome.
We are sort of in an objective free-for-all, so do we have any other
I loved that. That's great.
questions
Causing chaos is what I...
regarding Objectives 2 or 3? It's all good, it's all good. Member DiZoglio? We're on whatever
Whichever
objective
question
pleases
you
your
have.
heart.
Okay. So, so again, I brought this up at a meeting in the past about improved school and district rates of chronic absentee. So I know the DESE has been trying to send those nice little commercials out. But the problem is we're dealing with absentees in school, but the problem is we also have these individual kids that are not getting that support at home to go to school. I know I've talked to many school committee members throughout the state now, and they're dealing with the same thing, and they're also educators like myself. What are we doing to, and Mr. Crocker, because some of these things could be mental health, especially at home. So what are we doing to encourage, because sometimes it's the parents too as well, they're kind of, I don't want to say too protective of their children of going to school with their mental health, but what are we giving reassurances to parents that their child could come to school with certain behavioral or mental health issues that we could take care of? Because I just actually got that brought to me the other day, so I was wondering, do we have that type of support we could to parents?
So if I'm hearing you right, like, what are we doing from a behavioral health standpoint to support families and understanding that schools are safe and that they can access care?
Yeah,
Great.
because for instance, this, like, in this case that I actually learned, that the reason why this child was being chronically absent is that he is dealing with certain behavior issues mentally, she didn't want to go into more details.
Sure.
But that's why the parent was keeping the kid home. Not in Methuen, this is a totally different district.
Oh, all right.
Okay, but this is a perfect example, could be happening in our district as well.
Sure.
So the child was staying at home, and the mom was like dealing with those issues. What can this could also be happening in our district. So the question is, what do parents can provide in our services, because we've been talking about it all night, to stop chronic absentee in this type of atmosphere?
So I want to make sure to paint a picture of chronic absenteeism as being really a school and community public health crisis. This is not something that is solely going to be addressed by schools, actually. I think we can have a massive hand in it, but there are a lot of contributing factors. What are we doing? We're providing a lot of care to kids, right? We're providing a lot of mental health services that will hopefully address anxiety and depression and post-traumatic stress that they're experiencing, such that they are not able to make it to school. I think I also have to point to social influencers of health and education, like food insecurity and housing insecurity, and the fact that some students don't have access to health care, by providing referrals to services in the community. And we just had Jennifer Long here, talking about services that we can offer that will stabilize families, stabilize kids. I think that's a piece of the puzzle. I think we also do a pretty awesome job here of providing access to food. Food insecurity is a piece we're directly trying to address. So there are the services we offer. There's the prevention-oriented screening, where we're trying to find problems before they get to be so bad that students are chronically absent. I think it's also the case that we engage families in some discussion around the fact that avoidance, isolation, inactivity, those are cyclical. Those get worse if you lean into them. So if I know sometimes parents are like, my kid is incredibly anxious, I need to keep them home. To which I say, foist kids into slightly anxiety-provoking situations. We have to. If it's not a true danger, if we're not actually seeing them in distress in a way that's harmful, we actually need to lean into a little bit of discomfort such that we can break that cycle. But when we keep kids home, we reinforce the idea that they couldn't have done it in the first place. So there's a lot of family education that needs to happen. Care Solace is a piece of the solution. We've had some discussion with the Mental Health Task Force as well around Care Solace being a solution for social influencers of health and education. So we are potentially going to be able to enact some referrals for social services besides behavioral health services. So fuel assistance, food insecurity, housing insecurity, medical, kind of you name it, and we will be able to make referrals into that service array.
Thank you, Mr. Crocker.
Thank you.
And just follow up, And also, I was just wondering if throughout the school year, can we get some data where chronic absenteeism and how if it's increasing or over time? I don't know if we can get that data. Perfect. Thank you.
Other questions? Member Donovan?
Just real quick, since we're on, what, goal 4, I think, right now, it feels like. So in the attendance, are the parents getting alerts when their kids hit a certain day? Like, what is it, how many days when they're out?
5 and 10,
5 and 10, and that's happening?
yes.
Okay. I just think, and I'm sure we'll talk about it on the MCAS.
And the principals are continuing to get their list every day of when kids meet that, who's on it,
Yeah.
or every week.
I always wonder how effective that is, but it's just intriguing to me, and I'm looking forward to hearing what you're thinking about when you look at the accountability data.
Oh, we'll
on
get to
chronic
that in a moment.
attendance. Yeah,
Mhm.
on chronic attendance.
I
and what
know.
the sc- it- Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, move on.
This,
Yeah, we'll move on.
we're
to
done with the objectives, okay, great.
accountability and MCAS data.
Oh, great. So Dr. Glavsey's on again. So the second presentation is on the MCAS and accountability, so if you want to turn to that.
Okay, so this presentation will center on accountability data, and part of that is MCAS data, so that will follow. So I'm going to simplify the accountability system because it can be a little tricky as to how everything is calculated, but essentially the Massachusetts accountability system for schools has 2 components. So there's the normative component, which results in a percentile, and that would compare the school with similar grades, with the school to schools of similar grades throughout the district. And that one's a little bit tougher because it's non-high school, high school are the real designations. So that could be like elementary school versus elementary school, but whereas we're K through 8, it's kind of a unique category. So against non-high schools, it's tricky to compare one against the other. So for that component, there's 3 years of data that are factored into that. The criterion reference component has to do with targets, and that component is really us comparing ourselves against ourselves from the previous year. So there's measures there at the school and district level at targets that are set by the state. So the accountability targets had gone away during the pandemic. Last year was the first year we had them back. And then we had 2 years of data now to go on. And so that has to do with how we arrive at our figures, which I'll talk about next. So what are we talking about when we're looking at targets? What are the indicators? And I have on this slide, there's a difference between the non-high school and high school criteria because the high school have a couple more measures. So achievement is measured by the MCAS average composite scaled score for English, math, and science. Student growth is measured by the student growth percentile, or SGP. So just to review, that in itself is a little complicated. So student growth, we're looking at how a particular student grew from one year to the next compared to students who performed at a similar level the year prior. We have high school completion. We have the English proficiency percentage, which is whether students who are English learners are meeting their individual annual target goals. And then there's chronic absenteeism, advanced coursework for grades 11 and 12. And that comprises the accountability system. So you can see where the non-high school schools don't have a graduation rate and don't have the advanced coursework because they don't have 11th and 12th graders. the achievement category, or the MCAS category, counts a little bit more. So why do we have these? Because federal law requires states to establish goals and measures of interim progress toward those goals. And DESE calculates the goals for the district, school, and student group, which is another interesting area to look at. And these are determined by the path, which means how we're faring in terms of our growth and achievement, and also on past trends or reasonable expectations for improvement. So depending how we perform as a school and district against our targets, we're awarded points. So a 0 indicates that there was a decline from one year to the next. A 1 indicates there was no change. 2 indicates improvement. 3 is having met the target, and 4 is having exceeded the target. So in addition, for the school and district having accountability data that's centered on all the student groups and students, there's another subset that focuses on the lowest performing student group. So the lowest performing student group, as defined by DESE, is the group of students with the lowest combined ELA and math average scaled score. And to be in this group, you have to have been enrolled for 2 consecutive years in the district and tested in the district in 2023 and 2024. You cannot be a first or second year English learner. You cannot have been assessed using the MCAS alt in both ELA and math. So this comprises the lowest performing student group. Now, the high school lowest performing student group, because they're testing grade 10 students, we're looking at the achievement of that lowest performing 25% versus the achievement and growth of the bottom 25% from the year prior. The non-high school group, we look at the cohort of students. So did the students who fared in the bottom 25%, say, in grade 5, how did they fare in grade 6, that same crop of students? So in grade 10, it's comparing different groups of students because there's only one testing year, but in the non-high school schools, we're looking at that cohort. And here is what the accountability overall graph looks like, or chart. So you can see on the right side, the right 3 columns are all dedicated to the lowest performing student group. The first 3 columns, we're looking at the all students student group. So to arrive at the 2024 accountability criterion reference percentages and point values, the 2024 scores count 60%. We still have 40% of that score determined by our previous year. And the state does that so that eventually a one-off year won't harm you, and we're looking at consistency over time. So within this most recent year, which is 2024, which counts for 60% of what we're talking about in terms of our accountability data, half of that is credited for the lowest performing student group. So DESE really put a lot of weight into how the lowest performing student group performed and grew. And you can see here on this slide, we're looking at the grammar school. So this would be all 4 K-8 buildings that go into this non-high school group, did quite well in terms of the lowest performing student group. So when we look at achievement, a score of 4 points earned shows us that we exceeded the target for math achievement. For ELA, there was some improvement, but not quite at the target. Same for growth, except a math got a 3, which was meeting the target. And chronic absenteeism We received 4 points in the lowest performing student group and also the all student groups, which means that we exceeded the target that was set for us by the state as to where they hoped we would be for this past year. Okay, now here's the high school. So there's a few more indicators, again, because they have the high school completion category and they have the advanced coursework. So when you look again at that lowest performing student group, which is to the far right, we can see that there were improvements made in ELA and math achievement, improvements made in ELA growth and math growth. However, there were no points awarded in terms of chronic absenteeism for both the all students group and the lowest performing student groups, and no points awarded means a decline, which means those worsened.
Dr. Gillespie, can I ask you a question?
Yes.
I'm looking at both of these charts. Under the all students, for ELA, math, and science, it says points earned, 0 out of 4 for ELA, 2 out of 4 for math, and 0 out of 4 for science on the non-high school, and 0 out of 4, 0 out of 4, 0 out of 4 on the high school. And then when I look at 0 out of 4, the 0 on the little grading chart, it says declined. What does this mean? What is declined? Did they decline to give us points? Did we decline?
No, all right, so if we're looking at achievement, our average scaled score for instance, the ELA MCAS exam declined. So it was lower than it was.
Across the board, it declined overall.
In the non-high school all students and the high school all students. The lowest performing student group did not. It improved, but not to the degree that they had hoped by the target. And you'll see later in the presentation, that's consistent with what the state saw with ELA scores.
Overall, we were down, but our lowest performers performed better.
Yes. So what we're taking from that is that we have found a way to be successful in supporting students who need the most extreme interventions, so to
Right.
speak. And what we need to do now is not look away from that group, but kind of keep our head on a swivel and make sure that we're, again, aligning with that new teacher rubric and meeting all student needs. As we know, we have, if you look at this in a different way, when I get down to the MCAS scores, we have a really wide net of students who are falling in that middle range of partially meeting or meeting, and they're just on the cusp of moving to exceeding, and so we need to keep everyone moving forward.
Thank you.
There's a lot to take in on these, so we can, if you have questions as we go, we don't have to wait. You can just let me know. Okay, so this slide here. So when you look at all the points awarded and possible points, we eventually arrive at a percentage of earned points when you consider how many points we were able to earn. So the Methuen Public Schools as a district has been labeled as making moderate progress toward targets, having earned 46% of possible target points. So you can see in that row there, in order to move to substantial progress, we would have had to gotten to 50. That moderate progress range is really wide, 25 to 49. And Methuen Public Schools as a district falls into that category. Glad to see that we're closer to the substantial progress side. And school by school, here's the breakdown. So the CGS, Marsh, and Tenney were found to have made substantial progress toward targets. Pretty close there with 56, 57, 54%. And the Timony, 43% was found to make moderate progress. Methuen High School, again, was found to make moderate progress. yet their percentage was 27%. So they earned 27% of the possible target points available to them, which sometimes this can be a tricky game. If you fare really well one year and your targets continually go up, they never plateau, it can be really difficult to earn points in certain categories. But we definitely have things to look at. So the chronic absenteeism, which has already come up tonight. For this past school year, all the grammar schools exceeded their targets for reducing chronic absenteeism, so they each got 4 accountability points. And I have the breakdown there. So again, we achieved or exceeded the target, but we're still not pleased to see that in the grammar schools, there's a range of between 14 to 20% of students who are labeled as chronically absent. And again, chronically absent is missing more than 10% of the school days, so 18 plus days. The Methuen High School number is concerning, with 43.7% of students falling into that category. So again, as a reminder, chronically absent there's no differentiation between excused, unexcused, college visit, working, sick. It's just you're not here, and that's counted as an absence. And here's the breakdown of the lowest performing student group. So the number of, the percentage of points earned, possible points earned by the lowest performing students group by school. So outstanding to highlight that for the CGS, the lowest performing student group earned 95% of the points available to them. 67 at the Marsh, 71 Tenney, 74 Timony. MHS 35. Okay, and I have a few slides by MCAS test, by non-high school or high school. So here we have ELA, grade 3 through 8. So I've compared the district to the state average in scaled score. The next 2 columns are the growth percentile. The last 2 are the percentage of students who are meeting or exceeding on that MCAS exam. So ideally, we would like to see all of the district cells there highlighted in green, which would indicate that we're outpacing the state. If we are not outpacing the state in what we would call achievement, whether it be scaled score or meeting exceeding percentage, it's still encouraging to see that we're exceeding in growth, because that means that we're tracking down and we're covering ground. So you can see this is by student group shown to the left. So for objective 2, we're talking about shrinking disparities between student groups in terms of achievement and opportunity. I thought that this would speak to that. So for ELA non-high school, all but 2 student groups had equal to or greater growth than did the state. In 2 areas, the Hispanic Latino student group and the African American Black student group, our scaled scores and percentage of students meeting or exceeding also exceeded the state. This is ELA again, but this is grade 10, so high school. So interesting to see that the English learners and former English learners outpaced the state in their average scaled score and in their student growth percentile. We had some other student groups that were close, but not equal to or exceeding. And here's math, non-high school, so that's grades 3 through 8. Outpacing the state in growth in every student group. And again, African American, Black, and Hispanic Latino student groups earning higher average scaled scores than did the state. In high school math, which would be grade 10, the only outpacing area is L and former L in terms of growth. In science, non-high school, science is given only in grades 5 and 8. So only those two grades are shown here. And science, grade 10. Okay, so Asian students in Methuen meeting or exceeding percentage 82%, whereas the state was 76. And these are some trends that were noted in the conference that Desi provided in the press release. And they highlighted the fact that across the state there were declines seen in English language arts, which was concerning to them as well, because there's been quite a substantial amount of money dedicated to grants, which we've been the beneficiaries of. And they noted that for students in grades 3 through 5, they saw a decline by 2 to 6 percentage points compared to the previous years, which they're still attributing to effects of the pandemic, because those students in those grades were in preschool and first grade when the pandemic was in its height. And so we're still catching up on some foundational skills. And then the point was made too that the change in education is a process, not an event, and that we still have work to do in ELA and math. So I think similar to what we saw in the accountability data overall, we're proud of the performance of the lowest achieving group, which is 25% of students. And still a lot of discussion around how to support students, as I mentioned before, who are coming to us with capabilities that exceed their grade level, how to keep them enriched and growing and thriving, while also challenging students who are meeting or partially meeting.
So at this point, we'll dive right in with questions from the committee. Member Shabilia.
So there's a lot here. From a simple perspective, I know that you need to pass MCAS to graduate, and I know I have a question about the question.
Okay.
But first off, how many of our students passed versus how many didn't? Because that's not a number that's reflected anywhere that I saw in here. Like, how many kids are now unable to graduate because of this test?
So the way it works in grade 10, it is a graduation requirement. Ideally, you're meeting or exceeding, and it's clean and neat, and you've achieved that part of your graduation requirement. If you fall into the partially meeting range, which is the one below meeting, you still are good to graduate, but we need to track the growth of that student with a plan. So we're just making sure they're enrolled in the appropriate courses, and they're continuing to develop, and we're getting input for the teachers going forward, but they're still able to graduate. So the students that we're mostly concerned about are the students that fall into the not meeting category, because they're not eligible for the plan, and they certainly didn't earn that piece of the graduation requirement yet. So students who do not meet can then retest. And so we offer the retest in the following fall, the following spring, and again, they can try again in their senior year until they do earn that piece of the requirement. So it's not to say that if they did not meet, they're not graduating. It's just they've made the road a little bit longer for themselves, and that's when that's when we get involved with more interventions to support and develop growth in that area.
So I guess that expands my question then. So these, first off, the fact that the state deems some kids worthy of a plan and some kids not is a disgusting concept. I know that has nothing to do with us here, but it's, I know no one from DESI is watching, but that is a sad
know.
and just horribly disgusting statement for them to make, you say out loud. But that being said, I guess, how many of those kids do we have that took this in grade 10 or taking it now, just took it in grade 10 that are on track to maybe not graduate, and how many kids failed this go-around where they are now apparently deemed not worthy by the state? Like, I guess that for me is a number that is worth knowing, because that is something that hits close to home. And then if this question passes and MCAS becomes not a graduation requirement in a few days, does that change and these kids now are able to graduate, or are they grandfathered in? And because MCAS was a few months prior to testing, are they now victims of a skewed state mentality?
Okay, let me do the first part of that.
Sorry, it's just.
That's okay. Okay, so for Methuen High School grade 10 ELA, the percentage of students who fell into that not meeting, who need to get on that longer road, retesting road, would be 16%.
Of 100%.
That's another screen.
How many?
I'll have to get to that. So I'll tell you what concerns us is that next section up, the partially meeting, that's the 41%. So those are the kids that we would continue to track, but they would be considered having achieved that piece of it. So
They're not at risk of not graduating, but they do need to
for that piece.
focus on improvement. I mean,
Right.
we can all focus on improvement.
Right.
Let's-
We'll check the box, but we're going to keep making sure you're getting what you need is how I'd summarize that.
And are there state comps for each of these sections that you can share?
Could you say it loud?
State comps?
Yes. For the state, the percentage of students that fell into not meeting is 12%.
How many of, so in my conversations with Member Keegan, she is very vocal on the special ed impact of this test. And I know that you guys have all had those conversations with her. Of that 16%, do we know how many of those kids are special ed, and just by proxy of their diagnosis probably weren't going to pass the test? I don't know how to say that appropriately, but like they are, through their diagnosis, this test was going to be a hurdle for them anyways. Like, because Methuen does have a higher population of need from what I've seen just looking at other districts' websites because of, I don't know why, but because of our location, affordability, whatever it may be.
So the decision on whether to have a child participate in the standard MCAS or what they call the MCAS alt is an individual team decision. It's not based on diagnosis.
Okay.
So it's hard to say to you to answer your question.
Well, that actually is very helpful.
Yeah, so it's an individual team decision, and so when a student, when their abilities and weaknesses interfere with their access to grade level content, the team has to make a decision on whether they can participate in the state standard test or the state MCAS all test. I don't know if that answered your question, but.
It gives me enough information to understand what I'm looking at.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So we can circle back if you have more questions. Member DiZoglio?
Thank you. So again, so we're talking about grade 10, and from my understanding, there was 41% that was meeting partial, and then 16% did not make the cut out of the entire 10th grade. For ELA.
For ELA, yep.
So how many students are in the 10th grade? Like, how many students do we have in the 10th grade? Because no matter what we look at it, we got literally we got more than half the 10th grade either not passing it or meeting partial standards. And that, to me, is the most concerning of all this data. So like more than half of the kids are not meeting certain standards. And I understand COVID and all that, but what are we doing? And again, chronic apathism is also involved in this, but again, this is where I go back to the state and say, well, you know, it's really hard for the districts to do it when parents are keeping their kids home and, you know, not caring about their kids' educations in some degree, in some cases, which that is what's happening. But what's happening here where I see partial standards, and because they check a box saying that, okay, they did partial, so that's good, but we're gonna put them on a plan. When they graduate in those 2 years, how are we guaranteeing that kid that they're ready for the real world? That, to me, is the most concerning thing. And I remember that feeling, because and again, Methuen Public Schools did a lot for me, but I graduated with one of the lowest GPAs. And you know what? When I went out to the real world after I graduated, I had no idea what I was doing. Thank God I had a family support system at home that put me on the right track, and that's where I am today, and I think that, but not a lot of the students have that. So when I see this data, that just, it hits back on history with me, saying, what are we having in the pipe, we should be looking at that. That 57% of our students in the 10th grade have partial meeting standards. That is so concerning to me.
So to answer your question about the number of testers, I think, so 482 tested. And to provide the comps from on the state side, statewide, 43% of testers fell into those two categories that you were talking about, which would be the
Statewide.
partially or not meeting, 43% on the state side.
So the entire state,
Yes.
43% fall into that.
Yes, and you might have seen news stories recently talking about more money being funneled into literacy efforts, and we've applied for several grants, and I think all eyes are on that. So we expect there'll be a lot more opportunities from the state.
What about math?
Okay, all
I
right.
think it might be helpful, just for the sake of the discussion, if we go through each subject area and we can cover the percentage didn't meet, partial, and then the state comps, just for each section. That would be great. So we have for ELA,
Okay.
the percentage that didn't meet it was 16%, partial it was 41, so that's a total of 57%. And then at the state comp is 43, and that's for ELA, so we can go
Yes.
through each section.
Okay, so for math, the not meeting, which would be for Methuen, 17. For the state, 13. Partial, Methuen, 51, the state, 39. Science as well. They take science in grade 9. We ready for science? Okay. Not meeting Methuen, 14, state 11. Partially, Methuen 44, state 40.
So can you explain to me, just so it's been 20 some odd years since I've taken the MCAS. I was one of the first groups of people that actually had to pass this thing.
Okay.
Arguably the first, but Kristen and I will fight about that later. Do you have to pass the 3 of them? Is it a cumulative, like, what if one of these kids failed ELA but didn't fail math and science? Like, how does that work? You have to pass all 3.
Yeah, then we channel all of our efforts into supporting the
So,
ELA.
I mean, from my perspective, and Teddy, I see you over there, and you should sharpen your pencil for this one, but the top of the Eagle Tribune should say, the state deems 17% of Methuen students not worthy of a plan to graduate. That's, because that's those kids that not meeting, the state decides they don't need a plan? That's accurate? I'm sorry, that's what I'm hung up on. That's a disgusting comment for any state to make. What are we, Alabama? Like,
But don't they have 3 years to, like, don't they have 3 years chances to pass it?
those kids will, so the state doesn't deem them worthy, but do we do something to help that group of people?
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
All
Sorry,
hands on deck. when
I mean,
that
yeah,
happens,
this is, my whole career has been looking at these numbers, right? And what are we putting in, what is working? We keep it going, exactly what Dr. Glausi said. And then we look at these kids and say, what do they need? And that the high school has the strongest data team and has for years of, I take these scores, I look at kids' performance, I triangulate all that to determine which kids actually need. That's why we have remedial courses, that's why we have support for taking courses again. We make sure that they have a plan in place. They are signed up for retest. We will not let them miss a retest. So there's a lot of those supports in place, and I'm sure I'm missing some that Dr. Lopsy can help me, but there's a lot of support in place for the kids. It is, we hone in on that planning process and the not meeting process, because this is, we want our graduation, we want our kids to walk out of here with a diploma. So we work very hard at this high school to do everything we can after they receive these, before and after. I shouldn't have said it that way, but during their whole career here, to make sure that they are set up to succeed. And yes, it takes some of those 16% of those kids, it will take them a few tries to pass. And some will. And here's the other point, and we've seen this, and probably Dr. Golofsky more closely because she was at the high school longer, is, of those 75 students, because those are the names, right? We look at the names of the 75 kids that make up that 16%, right? Of those kids, some may not have taken it as seriously as they needed to that first sitting, right? So again, it's not a matter of can they or will they? There's a little bit of that. And so that's, the high school just goes right to that to figure out who needs the most support.
I'll say, if I can, just another challenge we have too is if I were to separate the students who have been with us for 4 or 5+ years versus the students who are new to the district, you'd see a different level of achievement. Students who arrive, say, in February, test with us for MCAS, and if they don't fall into the meeting or exceeding or partially meeting category, then it's a mad dash to figure out how best to help them, and they've just arrived. So we have a relatively, I'd say, relatively high churn rate in Methuen, which means students enrolling, unenrolling, coming in and out, and so it's hard to sometimes play catch up. So yeah, there's multiple supports to the degree where the data team will also determine a student needs multiple different subject areas of support, and what do we prioritize when in terms of which test is coming up first, and how does it go?
So that makes me feel better, the fact that we are going beyond I guess it's the state expectation for that segment of the population. because I was a little nervous there for a hot second. I appreciate that the extra work is going in, because to Member DeZoglio's earlier point, if you have a child that's just not taking it seriously, we shouldn't, I mean, that's gotta be a good chunk of that base. I'm still hung up on this, the viewpoint of the Commonwealth.
Member Maxwell?
Are you able to cross-reference, like, our assessments to the MCAS assessments and intervene there to see if maybe, I don't know, I just, with the kids that are not meeting the standards, can you find an earlier way to intervene before we're at that point? Does that make sense?
Before the grade 10?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
so you're like, if you see 16% of our students aren't meeting at all, are you going after those 16% and seeing their other assessments and seeing how can we help? What are we doing here?
I mean, it starts in middle school. I mean, this is the other piece, right? We're starting in 7th and 8th grade, looking at performance, looking at grades, looking at test scores, looking at internal and external, so that by the time they're placed in courses in high school, they're also placed in places where if they need remediation, they're going to get it in 9th grade. It's not going to be dependent on this test that they find out about the beginning of 11th grade.
They get it day one.
Yeah, it's the track of that process of data, looking at all the data points, does begin from 7th grade. They really take that 7th grade performance, 7th grade tests, internal, MCAS, external, to do course placement and put that into place the first moment they walk into 9th grade and 8th grade, right? We're looking at all those pieces.
Any other questions from the committee? All right, we'll move on. Oh, I'm sorry, Member Donovan?
I just am wondering, I mean, it's reading what's going on statewide, 16,000 students across the state, 10th graders failed. So that's a whole lot of kids that will be looking at this, and I moving forward, and with it looking as if this ballot question will succeed, I think. I just wonder what our roles will be, and maybe I'm being a little, I'm putting the horse before the cart, or the cart before the horse, yeah, that's it. I'm just a little concerned about what we would be doing to hold everyone accountable and to provide the best instruction and support. I don't know. I guess we'll know more this time in a
Yeah,
week
I mean,
or so.
we'll know in a week, but I think it's challenging to say either way what's going to happen, but our work doesn't stop, right? Our students have to pass their courses to graduate. We are fully aligned to Mass Core at this
Core. I was
point, so
gonna
the
ask you that,
expectations
yeah.
are higher than they have been. That was put in place probably 6 years ago-ish.
May I ask, is that a requirement or a
No.
suggestion from the state?
Suggestion from the state.
Okay, so that's how many courses?
Mass Core is not a requirement, yeah, so
Yeah.
Mass Core is really trying to align the high school with rigor and post-secondary, right? What those expectations may be and what they would suggest the high schools are aligned with. So we're actually exceeding the expectations of Mass Core at the high school at this point with number of years of math, English, social studies, foreign language, and
Fine
history.
arts.
What's that?
Fine arts.
Fine arts,
requirement.
yep, fine arts, PE, health, and, yep.
Civics?
Yep, and history. So all those things stay, and the MCAS isn't going to go away. I think
I
some
know.
people think that this question means that there's going to be no more MCAS. The MCAS will still exist, and we will still get scores. And much like our 3 through 8 that don't count for a moving forward or graduation, the 10th grade will still be a data point for us to see how well we're doing with our curriculum. It'll be opportunities for us. The state doesn't do it, we have to do it ourselves now. They used to do it actually for us. what Dr. Lopsy just said, the cohort. I was always interested when I was assistant superintendent of looking at the kids we have K through 12. If they test with us from 3 through 12, how are we doing trajectory with our own curriculum, right? Because it does tell a different story than how are we doing for the churn rate, right? That churn rate for us has increased in the time that I've been here. So the amount of students that leave and the amount of students that come in, that rate of stability is not as high as it used to be, of stable students that we have moving through the district. So that is increasing, again, like the past 3 years, about 1% a year, which is kind of a lot when you think about, out of 7,000, what that number is. So I've watched that go up as well in my career. So that's something, that's a harder target as well. So it's not going to all go away. We're still going to take it. We're still going to be required to do it. It's still a state expectation. We're still part of ESSA, the federal law that we have to assess our students. It doesn't leave us. We're still going to be testing MCAS in the spring. I think obviously the sense of urgency and the retakes and the necessity behind it, that is what this question is really about, right? Like how many, are kids going to have to retest it, retake it, retest? Probably not, because it's not a graduation required if that question passes.
But do you think with this sense of urgency maybe being diminished, that could certainly impact test scores for the test takers?
I
hope not, but I know how I would feel as a.
It's a long assessment, yeah.
16-year-old. Yeah.
I do think it will, and
Yeah.
again, those are the things we're going to have to see play out, and then how it impacts, right? Because again, the MCAS and the actual administration and testing of the MCAS isn't what we focus on every day, all day,
Right.
for our students to be successful and work on chronic absenteeism. All that stuff is still going to be here. So we'll have to see. I mean, it'll be very interesting to see what the outcome of this is and how it affects us. Because that accountability is just going to, it's challenging to ask kids to take it seriously sometimes. It'll certainly be more challenging if it doesn't count, if you would, at high school.
Especially when
That's
you
the
look at
challenge.
that data that you shared with us today, that you had questions about the kids who did.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it all comes
Same idea.
together.
Yep.
Yeah, okay,
Yep.
thank you.
I will say too, I probably should have highlighted earlier, our English learner population, who's also required to test and pass MCAS. There is Spanish version available in the science test if you've been in the country for fewer than 2 years. Otherwise, we could have a student who's been in the country for 2 years attempting to pass the ELA MCAS, which is really difficult. So we have a lot of supports in place for that too. And although it's nice to have some of the tests available in Spanish, for which, if that is the case, we do provide co-taught courses to support the students. Spanish is one of the 16 languages that we have in the school, so if you don't fall into English or Spanish, it's especially hard for you.
I'll just say that I had the same question that you did, and that's my concern about that ballot question. Do we have any other questions, discussion from the committee? If not, we'll move on. We need a motion and a second to approve the evaluation team chair position at the Marsh.
So moved.
Second.
Motion is from member Shabilia, the second is from member DiZoglio. Discussion?
So, unless you guys just want to vote.
I have questions.
We'll hear from you, Superintendent, then
Okay.
have questions. Yeah.
So I prepared this for you tonight. I am presenting this and asking for you to support a motion to approve this position. This is not necessarily a new conversation. We did have this during the budget cycle last spring. It wasn't meant to be in the budget last spring, but we are, for lack of better terms, we're at a breaking point at this point of needing support. The reason why we're looking to move this forward at the Marsh Grammar School is right now the Marsh does have the highest number of sub-separate and specialized special education students, plus the number of non-sub-separate students is higher. And the current SEA is just drowning for lack of a better term, in the amount of meetings that she has to do. She is also overseeing one of our sub-separate classrooms right now because that is where her level of teaching certification is, in addition to her administrative license. We all feel, Ms. Bozak and myself and Ms. Gordon and Ms. Keating have met multiple times and continue to meet regularly about how do we manage this and make sure that we are maintaining compliance and maintaining service delivery and maintaining communication. It is definitely a challenge. I have not sugarcoated that with the school committee or the public. We are working all the time to make sure that we are supporting the students. This position is something that you will see and hear about in other districts. Every district around us has ETFs or an ETC, an evaluation team chair or facilitator. It's a Unit A position. They do not do any administrative supervision evaluations or final decision makings. But this position is really about the initial and re-evaluations, some of annual evaluations, making sure all of the compliance and support is there. And so I attached a very lengthy job description it took us probably the better part of the last 2 weeks to really hone in. And we took things from other districts that we thought were really good and made our own posting. And yes, this is something that is a preview because this is something that I will definitely be advocating for in every building during this next budget cycle. Our SEA position, since I've been in this district for 23 years, has never changed. As you know, I have advocated for or not communicated in this room, so for many years, that our demographics has changed, our student populations have changed, our support staff have changed. The number of teachers and support staff in the building has quadrupled since I've been here for 23 years. And yet that position really hasn't expanded to be able to support that department in each of our schools. And we will continue to, it's not tangible, it's not doable if I don't put these supports into place. So I am, that's my plea, and I'll answer any questions that you have, but I am looking for, I'm hoping I can get your support tonight for this. We do anticipate, if we do get the support tonight, to post this immediately and open it immediately. So there's no date on it. And a question in your head is, we're already looking for special education staff. How would you possibly think we could fill this? But we're hopeful, because my glass has to be half full all the time, or full, if I can keep it full. That, there are different, these folks can come from a variety of different environments. And so I'm very hopeful that we have staff potentially internally and externally that will want a change in their current environment or coming from somewhere else or a different kind of a line of work and come here to do this for us. I'm very hopeful about that.
Member Shabilia.
So first and foremost, I have to support it. There's no way around that, and would hope that everyone kind of sees it the same way. But my questions kind of take a step back and look at this from more of a big picture perspective. I know last week we lost the director of the SEAs.
Yeah, special education, yeah.
Yep. What are we doing to support? So before I even ask that question, I know that in the beginning of the year, over the summer, we lost the other 6. Right? So we have one. We have one standing that was here last year.
No, 2.
2?
Bring us to 2.
Okay, well, that's great. What are we doing to support the 2 that we have still standing?
So this is one of them.
Yep.
Right, who is beyond stretched in what we're asking this person to do. They're all beyond stretched in making sure that we are, again, compliant, that we're facilitating meetings, that we are supervising and evaluating staff, right, teachers and program assistants, helping with programming, working with the rest of the administrative teams, and then also the work that we're doing, focusing on students with disabilities and English learners, that's sitting on them as well, right, with the administrative teams in the buildings. So we are, I would say, and I've said this before, I'm looking at Ms. Bozak, but I have been more involved in special education in the past 6 months than I probably ever have in my career, partly because I have to, but I have to support the staff that are here. And it is challenging, and I've shared this with you all before, it is hard to match some of the districts around us with what they are offering with compensation and caseloads. I can't fix that when people start looking. So that has been a challenge, that some of these folks are absolutely leaving because they're doing a similar job, potentially maybe a less demanding job, and for more money.
Because that
And
was
so I'm trying
something-
to, that's what we're trying to balance right now, is how can we make sure that we can separate duties and have the jobs be a place where they feel like they can be successful. And that's what we're working with all of our SEAs, the ones that were here last year and the new ones that are walking into this role.
Can I
And Ms.
also-
Bozak wants to speak.
Yeah, so last year too, we started the conversation on how to support, whether it was the current ones that we had or the ones that left. And that's when we added the teacher stipend. So we're looking at how that's been supporting the other buildings as well. And then given some of those changes and having been here as well, 18 years in the district and seeing these roles not evolve with the time, I've started to set out with comparable districts to see what their structures are, start collecting that data, what would work in this district or what wouldn't, because every district, functions differently. So I'm starting those conversations with my colleagues as well in other districts to get a different idea or a different viewpoint to bring it back. So in our discussions while we prepare for budget, to come forward with some proposals.
So, in doing some research, since I saw this Thursday when the packet was emailed to us, and spending 4.5 hours at the Marsh for trunk or treat last week and being able to talk to more people than I anticipated ever having to talk to in one night. I mean, there was so many good things said about the SEA at the Marsh. I mean, she seems to be, the all-around superstar from what I gathered from that conversation, those conversations. But for the folks that have left, what we were able to find is that, to your point, it wasn't always money-driven. It was caseload, it was expectation, it was, one of the folks that left that I had actually spoken to, it was supports. If we've got what can you tell us about the new folks that have come in? And this aside, because my big concern is, and you know this as well as I do, money's going to be tight next year, and we're going to be looking at what do we do and how do we do it with what we have.
Yep.
How do we support those folks now to make sure they come back next year?
Right. So I think Zula and Gina have both set up some regular supports with the current SEAs, and Ms. Boyce is especially in mentoring the new SEAs that have come in with helping with supervision and evaluation, modeling the meetings, right, making sure that she's in the building. At this point, Gina's been going into the buildings as well, meeting with teachers, sitting in on meetings. I've been doing some of that. I mean, we are, when I say the most focused on special education teaching staff, administrative staff, how the buildings are functioning, we have lots of conversations to have at this point, because it is an area that we have continued to expand because of the needs of our students. But it is the most challenging department with qualified staff coming in, right? A lot of our stress is staff related. That's not a secret either, right? If staff aren't here, the SEAs, the building principals, it's very stressful. It's stressful for the program assistants, it's it's stressful, yeah, for all of the staff around, their colleagues and everybody else who has to come in. So it's not a perfect system, but we're working really hard to support the staff that we have and keep them and figure out these ways to help support them, right? This job is going to help, although it's not direct student-facing, this job is going to help both the teachers and the administrators in the building to make sure that, again, we're compliant, we have a good direct contact for parents, right? It's not somebody who's going to be putting out fires and unavailable. I think that's the hard part too, right? We need somebody in the building who's a point of contact available, working both with the building and central office, special ed offices.
We can have a second round. Anyone else? Member Maxwell?
So does the special education administrator there now who also teaches, she teaches some classes, you said, so
She supervises one of the sub-separate classrooms.
will she be open to more services if somebody else comes in and helps with the evaluation process?
Right, so what this will do is so right now, she's covering a class, managing all of the special education kids in that building, K through 8, and running every single meeting for initial and reevaluations, and paperwork, and, right, there's timelines. It's very strict timelines for special education.
She will still be able to educate.
She
person
will be
will
able
do.
to focus more on programming, right? So the idea
Okay.
behind this is that our SEAs, who are the administrators, so think about this globally, but think about it here specifically too for tonight, is they'll be able to focus on the supervision, programming, communications of what's happening in the buildings without being scheduled for 3, 4, some of our SEAs are scheduled for 5 meetings a day. And so their availability is for their staff, for the parents, is really a challenge. So this position, taking those meetings and scheduling, and that's this person's that I'm putting in front of you tonight, the evaluation team facilitator, that is their primary role. Primary function is to make sure that we have all of the meetings scheduled appropriately, IEPs are done in a timely manner, communication to staff about those IEPs are happening in a timely manner, and also be a liaison between staff and, again, the central office, special education. That was a long answer to probably your short question.
I just
Yeah.
worry because this isn't in the budget, like, Dan had said, and we're already struggling with the special education teachers. We need more of those. Will this take from that? Will this kind of take away from hiring special education teachers?
No,
Okay.
because I need to have certain special education teachers in the budget. So I'm not looking to take this and not support
hire,
something
okay.
else. No, I'm adding. And I understand the stress behind that, and I wouldn't be adding. And Ian is maybe still on Zoom. But I have confirmation that right now, with some creative planning for this year, right? Next year's a whole different ballgame because I planned for that ahead of time. I have the funds for this position, for a Unit A position, prorated from now until June. A little bit of operating budget, a little bit of grants, super creative. It's really important. I wouldn't be putting in front of you tonight if I didn't think it was absolutely necessary, and you'll hear me say this again during the budget time for the rest of the buildings. So I'm setting you up for that, I guess, is what I'm doing.
Member Donovan?
Well, I think we really have no choice to support, and I think of if we want to drive away any of these really hardworking SEAs that we were lucky to work with through the years, the worst thing, and if we want to drive them away, we wouldn't fund this. I think this sends an important message. But just help me, I think we all need a little perspective. Do you know offhand the caseload at the schools? Could you share that? Because I think that might,
The caseload at that school?
yeah, that'd be great.
Yep.
That might seal the deal,
I was
like
doing my
if
math
anyone's
earlier.
on the,
So in the sub-separate program alone
yeah.
is a total of 79 students. On top of that, there's another 147 students in that building that require special education services. So at the Marsh alone, it's 226. And remember, we have 2 kindergarten classrooms that we have at Branch Street. That would be an additional 18 that had that been in that building. that would have been
Will be.
additional.
Yeah,
And will
will
be.
be added next year.
Yep,
So 200 and what?
26.
226, and this is the school with the highest
Highest
caseload.
sub-separate.
Okay, what about caseload numbers? Because,
They're about maybe about that 18 off.
we just can't afford to, I mean, what that ESEA at the Marsh is doing, I don't know how she's doing it.
Correct.
And doing teacher evaluations, and she probably has a pretty large staff. And the
Large,
PAs, I don't
support
know. I'm
staff,
sure they're working
correct.
it all out, who's handling what, but that could be, what, 60
Correct.
evaluations?
Yep.
Okay.
This is why we're looking
Yeah,
at this
I get it.
globally, right, about the type of program. It's the number of students, but it's also the type of program and staff
Right.
that are,
With the responsibilities.
exactly.
Do you see having to do this year? I know you're planning for next year, but I'm wondering if this is something that we need to prepare for before the school year ends at another school. Because I'm sure there are similar demands. and
I certainly
know
don't
you-
want to say like a guarantee no, but right now, this is at a point where I would need to do this right now.
For one school, but.
For one school, and I've prepared, the principals and the SEAs, I think, know that I'm headed this way. This has to be a non-negotiable in the budget, and that means me working through what that looks like without taking away other things. And I know that,
But I'm talking this year.
I know you are.
Okay.
And I don't want to say like, I'm like, no, I'm going to guarantee, no, I'm not going to come back here, but right now, I'm really focused on the Marsh,
Just those caseload numbers are,
really high.
yeah, I don't know how you can continue. And do it right.
And that's why I think it's important, I know we keep talking about bringing this potentially forward in the budget next year, but using this time right now to take a look at what other systems and structures are in place in other similar districts to see what the pros and cons to all of those pieces are and what would be the most effective system moving forward for Methuen.
Okay. So do we want to move the question?
One thing to add to your comment, Member Donovan, in the conversations I've had, and Ms. Bozak or Dr. Kwon, correct me if I'm wrong, but not only are those 2 kindergarten classes going to move forward to first grade, but you've got a handful of preschool classes that are going to add to that number next year.
Yes.
And by the sounds of it, from the folks that I've been listening to and learning from, there are very few of those kids are 8th graders that are going to roll to the high school.
Correct.
Correct.
So
That
that
bu-
building is not built.
That bubble, we don't see that bubble bursting for maybe another 2 years.
One of the staff at the Marsh had mentioned to me Friday night at Trunk or Treat that their concern was that next year when this happens, there's going to be, I think she said, closed bathrooms because of the way you have to toilet and change students. Like, it's just, these are the things that concern me, and I don't think one position is the solution, and I hope by the time budget comes around, we've come up with a plan, we've sorted out our differences with the council, and the audit is done, and everybody can be on the same page moving forward, because this has got to get better.
So, just to kind of piggyback on that, Dr. Kwong and I are also already taking steps to look at a different way of potentially programming and what that would look like, because we want to get all of those conversations done now, the research done now, so that when we come to you in the budget process, where we have our ducks in a row, that, again, keeping the same isn't always the best. We might need to modify some things, but we want to come up with a plan.
Just want to be able to foster the good ones. If we have
Correct.
great people, let's keep the great people here instead of losing them to the Lowells and the Lawrences
We
and
agree.
wherever they're going.
Right.
Do we have any other questions or comments? If not, we'll vote. We'll take a roll call.
Member DiZoglio?
Yes.
Member Donovan?
Yes.
Member Keegan? Member Maxwell?
Yes.
I'm sorry, yes? Member Shabilia?
Yes.
Member Willett? Mayor Beauregard?
Yes.
Unanimous.
Thank you very much.
That passes. Is there any other business from the committee? If not, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Motion from Member DiZoglio, the second is from Member Shabilia. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. The time is 8:31 PM, and we are adjourned. And I'll use the gavel for the very first time.
Good night, Methuen.